Our second reading picks up where the first one left off. Listen for the word of God. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than one of these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time, Jesus said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, Jesus said to Peter, "Follow me." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Our story for today starts at the Sea of Galilee, a sea that is featured in many of our gospel stories. It's a very familiar one, and it was very familiar to Peter. This sea, this water, was where Peter learned to spread a wide net, to move with currents, and to catch fish. This sea, Peter knew, understood fear. It had looked Peter in the eye in terror more than once. But other times, the sea could lay placid as a pond and wrap itself around Peter like a swaddling mother. This water, this sea, could hold all of Peter's wounds and all of Peter's dreams, all at once. So, in a post-resurrection haze, Peter returns to the Sea of Galilee for a fishing trip. He holds the boat steady while his crew, other disciples, loads the nets into the boat. And as the water lapped around Peter's ankles, might he have found himself mentally replaying one of his last encounters with Jesus? The one where he said, "You shall never wash my feet." You see, Peter desperately tried to show Jesus his committed and put together side. But maybe when Jesus stooped down to wash Peter's dirty, stinky feet, it was just too much for Peter. Maybe Peter felt like he could not get past the deep feeling somewhere inside of him that he was dirty and unworthy of being washed by Jesus. Maybe he remembered something he had done for which he now felt great shame. So instead of welcoming the washing, Peter pushes it away at first. So now, as nets fill the boats, could Peter have been filling with the memory and the shame of what he had said? As Peter waded into the water on that night for that fishing trip, something was not yet worked out inside of him. Early in the night, the crew had begun fishing, and surely they were happy to be together, making jokes, so they didn't mind that the nets were empty, but you know how it goes. 1 hour turns into 2, 2 turns into 4, still nothing caught, and the group starts to fall silent. The only thing to listen to was the sound of water swelling and slapping against the boat with a rhythm that only water can do. Perhaps the tension drew Peter again back into one of his memories, this time the one where he denies Jesus 3 times. Maybe the words rang in Peter's ears when all fell silent, the words that Peter had said, "I am not his disciple." Maybe Peter numbered each declaration with a new level of failure as he remembered it. Peter, the disciple so eager to do what is right, wanting to put his life on the line for Jesus, is the one who fails. On top of that, his actions contributed to an atrocity, while he protected himself and stayed away from the action. Peter's moral universe had torn into, just like the temple curtain at Jesus' death, torn in two. And Peter's got to wonder, did Jesus hear it when the denials were spoken, when the cock crowed? Peter wished he could ask, but since everything happened, Jesus hasn't spoken to him. So Peter bobs on the surface of the sea while his moral identity is still being worked out. By the time the moon drops low in the sky and the wind picks up, the tension in the boat has just got to be palpable. Surely the sons of thunder live up to their name more than once that evening. Everyone's stomachs stung. And then it was Peter's turn to run the net from the water. And as he descended into those familiar flows of the sea, the water knowingly encircled Peter. And as he fished, he could occasionally close his eyes and feel the water supporting him while his breath synced with the waves. And then, just as dawn was breaking, a voice called out from the shore and told the crew to drop their nets on the right side of the boat. Peter couldn't quite place the voice, but he listened to it all the same, putting the nets on the right side of the boat. And as the nets began filling with fish, someone in the boat whispered, "It is the Lord." Peter's heart must have beat out of excitement and exertion as he immediately swam to the shore. Peter's body must have felt the same awe and joy that he had felt when he saw his Lord standing alive in the upper room for the first time, thinking, "It's true. It's true. He is alive." Jesus conquered death, and Mary was right, but we had not listened to her. This is too good. Even the Roman Empire can't keep Jesus down. Wow. So as Peter greeted Jesus on the shore, it all must have felt like a wonderful dream. The signs of the resurrection were everywhere, sunlight bursting into the sky as old friends embraced, the smell of grilled fish wafting in the air as Jesus prepared breakfast. The net was overflowing with life, and yet, unlike the temple curtain, this net was not torn. The night of futile fishing was over. Jesus had not abandoned his disciples. And now the table is set. It all must have felt like a wonderful, restoring dream. And it's a dream that we live now, in flashes and in glimpses. And it's a dream that we cling to. Yet even in the midst of that dream, something is still being worked out. You see, I do believe that the whole world is in God's hands and that the resurrection is holy foolishness and freedom, and yet the resurrection breaks open just as much as it soothes and heals. I wonder if we ever use the joy of the resurrection to hide the fact that the wounds from Good Friday are not gone on Easter Sunday. Jesus comes back with wounds, not scars, but wounds where you can reach your hand out into and touch and feel Jesus' flesh and blood. The presence of Jesus' resurrected body on that Galilean shore does not immediately heal all wounds. Jesus did not take every story of pain in that one moment and turn it into a perfect story with a lovely bow on top to complete it. We all have those wounds still lodged in our bodies. I would bet that on that shore, Peter still ate that communion meal with Jesus, and surely somewhere deep in his gut, he felt the embarrassment over the words that he had said to Jesus at the feet washing. I want to bet that while eating Jesus' body broken for him, Peter still felt moral injury over failing his beloved friend. I want to bet that while drinking Jesus' blood shed for him, Peter still felt guilt over going back on his word. Because even now, even in the church today, something is still being worked out. Peter shows us that even in the world of the resurrection Christ, we still have those wounds. Wounds lodged in our bodies at the feeling of water, in the touch of our backs, in our hips, and in our guts. We have wounds in our sense of identity, in our failures and insecurities. We have wounds from the hurtful words that have been spoken over us that ring in our ears when all gets quiet. And at the same time we have those wounds, we have that dream, that Easter dream, where communities really are constituted by a meal around a fire, where the leaves of the trees really are for healing, where justice indeed rolls down like water, where relationships are restored, where things are healed. It's a dream where Jesus speaks our name and tends to our wounds. The dream that we live in flashes and encounters and bright, wonderful surprises even now. We live with wounds embedded in our bodies and the hope, the wild, gratuitous, sometimes even nonsensical feeling hope that restoration might be found because our God found restoration even through death. After the meal, Jesus walks with Peter, just like God walked with Eve and Adam in the garden. Jesus touches Peter's wound, and then he invites him back in to love. And he speaks to Peter the very words which were his first he ever spoke to Peter, saying, "Peter, follow me." Peter was exhausted from following Jesus all those 3 years. It had been a roller coaster, and Jesus says, even still, follow me. Peter still had his own memories and pain to work on, but Jesus says, even still, follow me. Peter had completely failed Jesus, and Jesus says, even still, follow me. Jesus decides to build the church universal, on Peter, this rock, this shattered mess of a rock. The church's very existence is founded on this wound and on this dream together. And as we hold both the wound and the dream in ourselves, we are invited to follow Jesus and Peter into the waters of healing, the waters that will hold you and breathe with you. It's an invitation to return to following the voice of Jesus, to loving God's people day in and day out, to return to repair and healing and even forgiving ourselves, because something is still being worked out in us. And thanks be to God for that.